Today is July 17th, 2025. This will be the final update for the potato growing experiment. I have told you of the nonstop rain we have gotten, and since my last update, it has still rained constantly. I'm going to go ahead and dig up these potatoes, and we're just going to see what we have because more rain is expected. It was raining on my way in back home this morning, and I looked at the radar and we're expecting more thunderstorms with more rain. So we're just going to see what we got. Before I start digging up, I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like. So my last update, I showed you that the potatoes had early leaf blight, and I showed you we had some new growth. So you can see the new growth. The new growth looks good. This one here, it's kind of branching out, vining quite a bit. Okay, this was bed 1. Here's bed 2. Over here is bed 3. And when I dig up these potatoes, if there's any potatoes, I'll remind you of what we did in each bed. And you can see some of the leaf blight. The plants didn't fare as well as some of the others, but even the ones that look pathetic, they do have new green growth. And then over here's bed 4. You can see these are completely dead. There's 1, 2, 3 that are completely dead. I'm also going to be pausing this video quite a bit while I work and dig these up because I'm very, very low on storage space. So I'm hoping I do have enough space, I hope, to go ahead and get this from beginning to end. But let me go ahead and tell you why I'm digging them up. Number 1, because of the nonstop rain we have got. All spring, all summer, just completely non-stop rain. So I'm afraid some of these potatoes are just simply going to rot and are rotting in the soil. The second is because of all of this new lush green growth that we have, I'm also afraid that the potatoes that are in the ground, because these plants have already flowered, okay, like they flowered a few weeks ago, I'm also afraid that this new green growth is being produced by, using the potato itself, okay? Since they have already flowered. Another thing, I wanted to let all of the green growth on the potatoes completely die and fall back, fall down, completely die, and let them sit for a week or 2 in the dry soil before digging them up. But again, because of the nonstop rain, I don't foresee that happening. So let's go ahead and see what we have. Okay, this right here is bed 1. We're going to go ahead and dig it up. Here's my little guide. So these 3 plants right here and this first plant here in the middle, these were planted as a whole potato, whole uncut potato, and they are planted straight into a hole at 12 inches deep. The other potato right here next to it in the center, and then the 3 in the back, these were also planted as a whole potato in a hole that was only 6 inches deep. Okay, so this one right here, this first one, it just had 2 potatoes. They were a good size. And again, these were organic yellow potatoes. And these are actually the size they are when I buy them. And then it had 2 tiny little spuds. So I'm going to put them in this basket right here. Now we're going to dig up this one next to it. Okay, on that center one, we got a handful. Now we're going to dig up this one. So these are the smaller ones we got. And then right here are the decent sized ones we got. And that was from the 1 potato plant. When I get all of the ones harvested that were planted the same, then I'm going to weigh them and we'll compare weights between each type of planting. Alright, so this is the last one right here to harvest that was planted the same. I just pulled up this last planting here. And I haven't dug in the ground yet, but I already got these 2 potatoes. But I wanted to show you this plant here, this root. So if you look, see if I can get it to focus. I don't know if that's even coming in. Anyway, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's little side roots, and then it's clean for a few inches, and there's other roots, and it's clean for a few inches, and there's other roots coming out to the side. And if you look at almost each side root, there's a little bitty nub. You see that right there? That's a future little potato. And then over here, there's another little future potato. Right there. And then as well as some on the very bottom, where the bottom roots are, right there. It's another little future potato. And there's actually several. Like there's one, there's a little bitty baby one. I mean, there's one. They're all over. So like, I guess if I let this stay in the ground, looks like I could get another half dozen or more potatoes. But regardless, this video, this whole experiment has not been about how much we can harvest. It's just been to see if there's a difference in the planting method. But I did want you to notice how it does send off roots at its side. It looks like every few inches. And at each one, at each level, it looks like it's producing potatoes. The reason I wanted to point that out is because I heard some people say that it doesn't matter if you continue to trench it up higher and higher, or if you just plant it really deep, or just level it off, that they're only going to produce in one spot, like the base or the upper or whatever. This right here, at least for this particular variety, it proves otherwise, because here's a little potato that's at a higher level. Here's a little potato at the medium level, and here's little potatoes at the bottom level, and they're all the same size, okay? So it looks like it's producing potatoes from the base up until where it's covered with the ground about the same time. Hopefully you can see that, and hopefully it made sense. So all of these came from one potato. Let's go ahead and put in this basket. Okay, so that was 4 potato plants. And this is how many we got. Now these 3 potatoes in the back and this one right here, that was one in the center, these were all planted whole in a hole at 6 inches deep. Okay? So let's see what we got from them. Something I've noticed about all these potatoes so far is that all of the potatoes seem to be down. They don't seem to be spread out. Okay. So right now, but I'm not done going through it, this potato plant was planted 6 inches deep. All these potatoes right here, they are about 3 inches below the soil. Okay, after digging up just that first one at 6 inches deep, it's already a lot easier to find all the potatoes. It doesn't take as long because you don't have to check so far down. But we got, I'll just put them in this bucket here. So that's from that first potato. Now we're going to do the center one here. That one had quite a few potatoes. They're pretty small though. Oops. These were all from that other potato. Now we have 2 left. Here's what we got from the last potato in the back. We still have the last one in the center. Now let's do this last one here in the center. These are the potatoes that we got from that last plant in the center. Now these are the potatoes that were planted whole in a hole at 6 inches deep. I'm going to rub off the excess dirt from them before I weigh them. Then I'll probably have to go back and check the 12 inches deep potatoes and maybe rub off some of the excess dirt on them as well. One thing I noticed about this bed, I haven't done the other beds yet, remember, but all of these potatoes, not one of them, there has been no potatoes that I have found that have been rotten. They have all been nice and firm and just great quality. So that was nice. That's nice because of all the rain that we got. I was afraid that there'd be some rot going on. It's also nice because these were not certified certified seed potatoes. Once these potatoes are all washed, to where they don't have this dirt on them, they actually look like the Azure Standard yellow organic potatoes that I buy. Those come in various shapes when I buy them. The yellow potatoes, they are not large potatoes like russet. They're a more smaller potato. Although some of these are pretty small, obviously. All right, we have the scale zeroed out with the weight of this basket on the scale. It's zeroed out. Now, let's weigh these potatoes. These potatoes weigh 3 pounds, 8.6 ounces. Okay? So the potatoes planted whole at 6 inches deep in just a hole, no mounding or anything, they weighed 3 pounds, 8.6 ounces. So I went ahead and rubbed off the excess of the potatoes that were planted at 12 inches deep. However, I found these potatoes when I was digging up the last potato that was planted at 6 inches deep. These were from the 12-inch deep potato that was next to it. And I know that by the stem end, it was pointed towards the 12 inches deep instead of the 6-inch deep potatoes. All right, so let's go ahead and re-weigh these. Okay, 12 inches deep, planted whole in a hole is 3 pounds, 10.8 ounces. That's all I'm doing today. Maybe in a couple days I can do another bed. Here's a side-by-side comparison. Both baskets of potatoes were planted whole in a hole. These were planted 6 inches deep. These were planted 12 inches deep. The ones that were planted 12 inches deep, they have just a little bit more weight to them than the ones at 6 inches deep. However, the ones at 6 inches deep appears to have produced more potatoes, but they're smaller than the ones at 12 inches deep. There's not too much of a difference, but there's still a difference. I'll add to this video whenever I go and harvest the next bed. Today is July 19th, so it's 2 days later. We're going to harvest this bed of potatoes. So there are 8 plants in this bed. These first 3 closest to me, and this one in the center, these were planted as cut potatoes that had scabbed over and planted in a 12-inch deep hole. This one potato plant and these 3 in the back, these were also cut potatoes that had been scabbed over and planted in a hole 6 inches deep. So let's go ahead and dig them up and see what we got. There's one right away, and it's already starting to sprout right here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause it because I am still low on storage space. This is what we harvested from this one potato plant. I'm going to go ahead and put these in the bucket here, and I'll bring them up closer. I hope you can hear me okay. My husband is mowing. One thing I noticed about these, the majority of these have already sprouted. And look at this one. It already even has little green leaves. And this one has a little white, it's already chitting already, has a little white sprout. And most of these already are sprouting. So I did make a good decision in going ahead and harvesting these. That's something I did not notice on the potatoes that were planted whole on the other bed. But here's what we got out of one plant. So I'm going to continue on with the other bed, with the other plant, I mean. Second plant here in the middle, it gave us just these potatoes, not very many, but they're decent size. Well, 3 of them are. Again, this whole bed I'm working on right now was all planted using cut potatoes that had scabbed over, and they were planted just in a hole, no hilling, okay? These 2 that I've already dug up, they were planted in a hole that was 12 inches deep. Now, I do want to say that I've noticed that instead of all being in one level of the soil, like on the other ones, the other bed that I already harvested that were whole potatoes planted in a hole, they were kind of all in one general area, even though their stem had little potatoes on different levels, different heights of the stem. These have had potatoes at different levels in the soil, and I want to show you that on this next one. So I'm going to bring the camera over, and you can see the color of the soil right here, this lighter color, that's where it's the top of the soil and it's dry. And you can see there is a potato just barely below the surface of the soil. Okay, and this potato is coming from this plant right here that we're going to dig up next. You can see it has already sent out a new potato plant. I did not notice the other bed doing that. The other bed, I think for the most part, all the potatoes grew in one general area as deep as what I planted the original plant. But these so far seem to be growing deeper and then even higher. So, and then anywhere in between. I also wanted to go ahead and show you the dirt, what it looks like. If you remember, it's just sawdust and compost and then a bunch of twigs and stuff, which how we filled this bed is in that original video, the very first one, okay? Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and dig up this plant. Okay, so here's the harvest from that third potato over there. You can see that's actually a pretty good harvest. They are all about uniform in size. So it has a really good size. There's a few small ones, but again, just like the other ones, they are already, the potatoes that grew fresh, they are already sprouting to grow a new plant. So I did harvest these before it was too late. Probably should have been harvested a little sooner, which I knew that, but again, all the rain. This one's got something funky going on with it. It's growing some potatoes off of the potato, as is this one. But I wanted to show you, so here's the potato that it grew fresh, and it sprouted, and this little yellow part is what would be the green leaves, and you can see it's sending off all these roots. It would make a new potato plant. So on this one plant, wasn't really paying attention to the bed I harvested the other day, but this plant right here, I noticed that the bigger potatoes were right at the soil level, and these smaller potatoes, this is what I dug up way deep down. So by this one plant, it looks like the older potatoes are going to be more at the surface or higher up on the level of the plant than the newer ones, the smaller ones. Remember, I planted potatoes with 2 or 3 eyes each for each hole. So these are the 2 that came from this last one that we just harvested. And again, these roots right here coming off of the stem of the potato plant, you can see right here is where it was in the ground, right there, because you can see the green and then the dirt. And these bigger ones were at the soil level nearly, and these are the ones that were bigger that I harvested right at the soil. And then the farther down you go, here are some more, and then you can see even new little potatoes forming. All right, now we have one left of these 12-inch deep hole for cut and scabbed, and that's this one right here. So we're going to harvest that one next. And then these 3 and this one will be the 6-inch deep cut and scabbed potatoes. Okay, so these are the potatoes we got from that last one. And these are all a really nice size. This one especially. Okay, so we got 3, 6, 7 potatoes. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in this basket. So we got a good sized basket of potatoes from 4 potato plants, just 4 potatoes that we planted that were cut and scabbed over and planted in a hole 12 inches deep. Now let's weigh them and see what we got. That basket of potatoes was 6 pounds, 14 ounces. Almost 7 pounds. That's pretty good. Now let's do the next one. Okay, so after digging up all the potatoes that I think there are, to make sure, I just take my hands and I take the fronts of my hands like this, go straight down and kind of lift up, and then take my fingers this way and do the opposite. Go straight down, lift up, and I just kind of sift, and then I do both sides as well. I get down as deep as I can, flip it over, and just kind of sift it to make sure that I didn't miss any potatoes. Okay, so on this one plant here, this is what we got. We got 6 good-sized potatoes. I know I said this a while ago on the other box. These yellow potatoes are actually the size of what I buy from Azure Standard anyway, so I am very happy with these. So far, okay, so we finished harvesting this bed right here. Okay, so instead of showing you the potatoes that came from each of the 3 back plants, it was impossible for me to discern which potato came from which plant. So what you see before you is the potatoes from 3 of the plants, originally planted, I should say. The reason I say originally is because, and another reason it was difficult for me to discern, was because there were several new green growths that had sprung up that I did not plant, and those green growths had produced some of these potatoes as well. So this bed was all cut and scabbed over potatoes. The first 3 and the one right there in the middle was planted 12 inches deep in a hole. The back 3 and this one here in the middle was planted in a hole 6 inches deep. So what I have noticed, well, let me go ahead and put them in the basket. Okay, so again, these 8 originally planted potato plants, this is what it produced, this many here. They were both cut and scabbed over. This one was planted 6 inches deep. This one was planted 12 inches deep. The 12 inches deep one was 6 pounds and 14 ounces. And I haven't weighed this one yet, but I want to go ahead and say is obviously the 12 inches deep one, you can just tell there's more potatoes, and I can tell it feels heavier than this one. The potatoes are larger, although I do have some good sized ones in here, but these potatoes overall are larger than these. Also, by harvesting both beds already, the one I did earlier in this video and the one just now, so far there has not been not one potato that has been green, that has been moldy, mushy, or rotten. They have all been absolutely perfect. So I am surprised of that because of all the rain we got and then the early leaf blight that it had as well. So I'm very surprised with that. I also noticed that no potato grew deeper than I had originally planted it. All right, so let's go weigh this one. The ones that were planted 6 inches deep weighs 4 pounds, 2.7 ounces. So more than 2 pounds, like 2.5 pounds less than the ones planted 12 inches deep. So that is a noticeable difference. Okay, so here are 2 of the comparable beds fully harvested. So let's go ahead and give you a review on what they are. This box right here, this first box on the left, was potatoes planted whole, either in a 12-inch deep hole or a 6-inch deep hole. And that total weighed. This box was potatoes that were planted cut and scabbed over in a hole, either 12 inches deep or 6 inches deep. And its total weight is 11 pounds, 0.7 ounces. So the ones that were cut and scabbed over in this one experiment doesn't necessarily mean anything, but in this one experiment, the ones that were cut and scabbed over produced quite a bit more weight of potatoes than the ones planted whole. Now, if you look, it doesn't really look like too much of a difference, but the ones cut and scabbed over do have more potatoes that are larger. So even though we probably got more individual potatoes in the box on the left at keeping the potato whole, the one on the right at cutting and scabbing over appears to have produced larger potatoes. Now we are doing this bed. This is bed 3. This entire bed was trenched at 6 inches deep. These 3 in this first row and this one in the center, the potato was cut fresh on site. It was not scabbed over. These 3 in the back and this one here were planted whole. Okay? So this whole bed is trenched at 6 inches deep. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to start digging up the 4 plants that were cut fresh on site. Okay, this one potato plant right here was a pretty pathetic harvest. We got one decent sized potato and then just a little handful of little ones. So that was from one potato. Let's continue on with the next one. Alright, the second potato plant right here, it did better than the last one, but still not quite as good as the last bed we did. Whoops. So this is what we got out of that second plant. Okay, so they're pretty small. I'm going to go ahead and put them in this bucket with the rest. But one thing I did want to show you also in this plant, there were actually, oh, here's another one. There were actually 3 more potatoes, but they were rotten, and it's kind of slimy and nasty. They're rotten. Now, I don't know if this is a bug that started this, or if it was all the rain, or if it was the early leaf blight, but on the other 2 beds, we didn't have any signs at all of any illness whatsoever, but this one did. So we're going to continue on and see what the next one gives us. Alright, here's the next one. You can see it didn't have a very good harvest either. It did have more and they are pretty small, but I noticed that most of these are damaged. So the middle one, so the last plant we just dug up, I showed you that they were kind of rotten. This one, this plant we just dug up, most of them all have these marks in them. These are not my tool marks at all, because once I planted them I didn't use any tools, and these are old, but you can see all of these, all the damage on them, and most of these that I just dug up are like this. So, and then the second plant that I dug up, part of this basket, also had 1 or 2 that was damaged also. But I'm not done with this bed, obviously, but one thing I did notice is that the last 2 beds I dug up do not have plastic lining, but this bed I'm working in at the moment and my next bed both have plastic lining. So I'm wondering if maybe because the soil stayed more moist than the others due to the plastic, if maybe it attracted a certain kind of damaging pest. It's just a theory. I don't know. But anyway, let's go ahead. I'm going to dump these into this basket, and then we have one more plant that goes along with this planting. So we got to dig up this one here, and then we'll weigh them. One thing I want to go ahead and show while it's on my mind, you see these roots here? This is where the soil comes up to, so from the soil line to the bottom of the plant, it's only about maybe 3 inches, even though this plant was planted at 6 inches deep. All of them so far have been very shallow, so that could be another reason why we're not getting much of a harvest, whereas this one was also planted 6 inches deep, and it's closer to actually being 6 inches from the soil line to the base, but this one was just planted in a hole. Remember that, just in a hole, whereas this one was trenched. So as the green grew above the ground, I would just mound soil. Higher, right? This one was planted. The ones that were planted straight in a hole were already 6 or 12 inches deep. So you can see there is a significant difference between those two. So far, it's looking like a hole is the best way to go, but let's continue. That last one that was cut fresh on site and trenched at 6 inches deep, gave us this. All right, so that's what we got. All right, we're gonna go ahead and weigh these. So this is what we got from the 4 plants that were cut fresh on site, trenched at 6 inches deep. Again, they were planted in a bed that is lined with plastic, and they were covered with straw. The straw is not organic, so it could have pesticides on it. I don't know. So just keep in mind those 2 could play a factor. All right, I'm going to go ahead and weigh these, and I'll be back. They weighed 2 pounds, 6.3 ounces. So that's our worst harvest so far. Even though it still weighed over 2 pounds, most of them are not any good at all. So there's very few in here except the smaller new ones that are edible. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's dig up these last 4. These 4 were planted whole, trenched at 6 inches deep. So we still mounded the soil on top, okay? But we dug a 6-inch deep hole, planted the potatoes whole, and then mounded it up, hilled it up as needed. And again, it's also covered with straw in the same container, in the same bed that is lined with plastic. Here's what we got from our first one that we harvested that was planted whole. Okay. All of these are good. None of them have any damage whatsoever. I always drop them. But I did find one that was rotten, kind of slimy and moldy. Well, it's not moldy yet, but it's rotten and all nasty. Okay, but that was the only one I found, but the rest of them are great. All right, so let's dig up the next one. Right here is what we harvested from that one. Again, it's a small harvest. I did find one that was rotten, and then I found one that was damaged, eaten on, which was going to also rot just like those, but these are good. All right, let's go ahead. We have 2 more to dig up. Just harvested our last plant, and here are the potatoes that we got. So not terribly too bad. We did have one potato that was starting to go rotten. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put these in the basket and weigh them. Okay, so that test wound up weighing 3 pounds, 7.3 ounces. Just to review, we had 4 plants that were planted in a trench at 6 inches deep. These were cut fresh on site. They did not scab over. And we hilled or mounded the plant up as needed, and it gave us 2 pounds, 6.3 ounces. This one was planted in a trench 6 inches deep, and they were hilled or mounded up, but the potatoes were planted whole, okay? And it gave us 3 pounds, 7.3 ounces. This one does not have very many edible ones at all. These were very much no good, okay? Now, both of these were planted in a bed that is lined with plastic, and it was covered with straw. We've had tons of rain. The plastic could have made it retain moisture more. I will take a break, and maybe later or the next day I will finish the last bed. Today is July 20th. This is our last bed of potatoes to harvest. Okay, so this row right here and this one, these were potatoes that were planted whole in a hole in the ground at 12 inches deep. These 3 potatoes in the back and this one were potatoes that were planted whole, but in a trench that was 6 inches deep. So these 4 right here, these are the ones like the previous bed that we hilled and mounded up as the leaves of the plant grew. Okay, so let's go ahead and dig up the whole ones that were 12 inches deep in a hole. Now, these were planted like one of our first beds, okay? And these were planted like our previous bed that we dug up. So let's go ahead and we're going to compare these 2. One thing, I haven't dug up any potatoes yet, but one thing I wanted to remind you was that these two potatoes, this one and this one in the center, plus this middle one, so 3 out of our 4 potatoes on this bed were completely dead. Here was the plant, and here's another one. They were completely dead because these 3 actually completely died from that early potato blight. And this bed also, like the last one, is lined with black plastic. And as I was digging, I wanted to show you that this soil, the perimeter of what I'm digging so far, has mold on it. This is quite surprising. On that one potato plant that had died from early potato blight, I found one tiny little bad potato, and then one potato that had been a potato but is now nothing. I did not find anything else. No more potatoes. No, this is all I found on that one plant. Completely nothing. So, let's dig up the next one. Okay, on that second potato plant right here, again, it was one that had died from the early potato blight. It did not produce any potatoes either. I did not even find a tiny little one, not even a mushy, rotten one. So, not sure about that. Let's go ahead and dig up this one. Now, this is the only one of the 4 that was planted this way in this box that is still alive. I have one more that's dead, planted this way, but let's go ahead and dig up this one where the plant still is green. All right, that plant that still had some green growth on it, that was also planted as a whole potato in a 12-inch deep hole. It did produce potatoes, as you can see. We've got these potatoes here and these potatoes here. Okay, so it actually did a pretty decent quantity of potatoes. However, we have, most of them are no good. You can see they're rotten, slimy, and they stink. And even these, now these 2 here, I actually pulled off of the plant, of the roots, when I pulled the plant up, and they were already mushy, like even on the plant. See that? Okay. And this particular one decided to go ahead and sprout. All right, so we have one left in this bed that was planted as a whole potato, 12 inches deep. And again, it was one that had died. So we're going to go ahead and dig that one up. And then we will do these 3 and that 4th one there. Okay, so our last plant that was planted this way, it had a couple potatoes, but they were just mushy. Okay, they are rotten, no good. All right, the potatoes that we dug up from this hole, I went ahead and put in that basket, but I did not put the rotten, mushy potatoes. All right, but that is how this bed did on a whole potato planted in a hole at 12 inches deep, which is much, much different than when it was planted in the other bed in a hole 12 inches deep, a whole potato. Those did pretty good, and they were perfect potatoes. They all got the early potato blight, but I guess these, for some reason, could not survive it. So I'm thinking possibly the blight had just, rotted the potatoes, and that's why we're not really seeing any potatoes to even speak of on the plants that were actually completely dead. All right. So I'm not even going to weigh those because you can tell it might be, 3/4 pound, maybe. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dig up these. Now, these that we're about to dig up, these were planted as a whole potato, but they were trenched at 6 inches deep. Okay, so this potato, even though the plant was still alive, it may have only had maybe 1 or 2 potatoes on it, but I cannot tell for sure because it was just slime. When I was digging, it just spread out, oozed out. It wasn't even a whole potato. It was just pieces of potato skin and stinky slime. So, did not do very well. I'm just going to go ahead and dig up all 3 and then I'll show you all at once. Okay, so we dug up the last 3 of those potato plants. These right here, these 2, and then what's on here came from the first one. That one back there. These came from the middle one. All these right here. And you can see it was going rotten. And then this one came from the last one. All right, now let's go ahead and just weigh these, although that one's not edible. All right, and that is what we got out of the box that was planted as a whole potato 6 inches deep in a trench that was mounded up. The potatoes that were planted whole in a hole at 12 inches deep, they weighed 13.7 ounces. The potatoes that were planted whole in a 6-inch deep trench, they weighed 1 pound 7.8 ounces. Here are the potatoes. They're all cleaned off better. I'll insert the total weight right here above the potatoes. I have decided to go ahead and make one more video that'll be a summary of how each planting method did and also possible problems that there were, whether it was bacteria or fungus, growing conditions, etc., and possible causes. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out the entire playlist